Le Mans Ultimate has just launched like 2 days ago, and I've decided to jump into the game and directly compare it to the sim that I know best, iRacing. There's a lot of differences between the two games, but I've really wanted to feel what's the difference behind the wheel, how does the car feel, and the actual kind of driving differences between iRacing and Le Mans Ultimate. So I'll be going through all the car classes in Le Mans Ultimate and comparing them to iRacing, and also giving some first impressions as I drive them for the first time and see if you'll like them or not. Spoiler alert, if you like R Factor, you'll probably like Le Mans Ultimate. Let's get into it. So I've played a fair bit of R Factor 2 in the past, and as you are probably aware by this point, Le Mans Ultimate is based upon R Factor 2. It's built from R Factor 2 and it's heavily modified, but the physics should be kind of similar to R Factor. I should also say that I'm not an expert at R Factor, and I am coming at this from an iRacing lens. Don't take my words 100% seriously, that's the way I'm viewing things. To start off with, my first experience with this game is that the game wouldn't start. I got the game working, I installed it on launch, and I streamed for about an hour, and then the game crashed so hard that I couldn't access the task manager to close the game, so I was just stuck there for like 10 minutes. It was terrible, and then when I tried to restart the game again, it wouldn't work. It turns out it was an antivirus issue, and we've actually already included some information about fixing that in our review for Le Mans Ultimate, but it means that my first impressions were not good. Once I was actually in the game and got my antivirus not deleting the exe file, I found Le Mans Ultimate kind of difficult to set up. I think iRacing, it's been around for a long time now, but iRacing is a really confusing member site and UI, but once you're actually in-game, it's really good at telling you what you need to set up. If you need to set up your wheel, you need to set up look left and look right, how to get in and out of the car, that kind of basic stuff. In Le Mans Ultimate though, this is an early access game, and it kind of shows you just need to figure this stuff out for yourself. The game does not calibrate or automatically assign your wheel or any buttons. You have to go find the buttons yourself, and there's 300 buttons that you have to choose from. It's tricky. If you're used to R Factor 2, it's fine, but if you're coming at it for the first time, it can be overwhelming. Okay, let's start with the actual driving, and the first car that I drove was the Toyota hypercar, and I drove this at Fuji Speedway, which is one of my favorite tracks. And my first impressions is that this car is really slippery on cold tires. This is a theme that we'll see in all the hypercars. I'm sure you've seen this in all the other reviews of Le Mans Ultimate that have come out so far. But it takes many, many laps for the tires to come up to temperature. On my first lap, it wouldn't stop, it wouldn't go, and it wouldn't turn. And I got to 200R and I had a big tank slapper and died on my first lap in the car. Once the tires do come up to temperature though, it feels a lot better. I do my first impression was kind of under braking, and as you downshift, I love how the car kind of jumps sideways. In iRacing, if you downshift too fast, often the car will just kind of chatter in the rear and keep going straight as you get rear locking. But in Le Mans Ultimate, it kind of jumps sideways. I did like that. I will say this car was really scary at high speed though. Even once the tires came up to temperature, it can swap ends really quickly. If you do have oversteer at high speed, it'll go on you really fast and you'll be backwards before you know it. This is kind of similar to iRacing. So the other main thing I found driving this car is a common theme in R Factor, and that is that the slip angle is really hard to judge. I'm definitely coming at this from an iRacing perspective as a game where you basically never slide the car. If you slide the car, it's bad, always. In R Factor 2 and Le Mans Ultimate, and also Rennsport and stuff, a little bit of slip angle, a little bit of slide is actually good. That's what you want the car to do. But I'm not super used to it, and I find it really hard to tell the difference between a good slide and a bad slide. This was really obvious in Le Mans Ultimate at 200R. The car is kind of on an edge of a slide the whole way around, and then it's suddenly too much and you can overcorrect really quickly. From my experience as well, this is kind of how cars work in real life, but they feel a little bit more forgiving past the edge, I found. On turn into a corner, I found that there was not a huge amount of feeling in Le Mans Ultimate. I couldn't really feel where the understeer started compared to iRacing, but this just may be experience that I need to gain in the game. Once the car does load up mid-corner though, I think it kind of shows the grip a lot better. But the initial turn in, I feel like I don't have as much. The game's not signposting it as well to me as iRacing does. One other thing that I found, and this isn't particularly driving, but the track does feel alive. There's something about all the cars around in different classes, and the curbs are scary, but the car is like, I don't know, you've got a hybrid and all this stuff. It's cool. Like, I also really like how long it takes for the tires to come up to temperature. It makes the stint feel a lot more varied than in iRacing. In iRacing, you leave the pits, the tires are good, and you basically just send it for your entire stint. The tires will kind of wear out at the end of the stint and the fuel will come off, but otherwise, all your laps are identical. Whilst in Le Mans Ultimate, it feels alive. It feels like it takes so long to bring the tires in, and I don't know, I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to add a whole new dimension to multiplayer online multi-driver racing when they eventually put that in the game. Feels like the stint has a lot of character. Next class that I tried was the LMP2, and my first impressions, I drove out at Spa behind a GDE, and oh my god, this game looks beautiful. This version of Spa just looks so bright and colourful and vibrant compared to the iRacing one, which is like a decade old, and even compared to some newer games, including like Rennsport and stuff. I think it's the best version of Spa I've ever seen in a racing game. I do, however, get to the top of Radion and the game locks up for a full second and I crash the car. So it's early access, but this stuff is frustrating. This just might be a me thing, but I like the feeling of throttle. I said I was struggling to understand the slip angle, and I am. It feels like I can use more of the throttle range. Whilst in iRacing, I'm often using like very little throttle, then 50%, then like 100%. Whilst in rFactor, I'm like really kind of progressively applying the throttle and feeling the thing turn as I add more and more, which is really nice. I get to the braking zones and same impression that I got in the hypercars. I love the feeling how you can downshift and it jumps sideways. In iRacing, often you get downshift protection or the car will just shudder and wheel hop and go straight. But in Le Mans Ultimate, the moment you pull a downshift, it's like bang, oversteer. I love it. Feels really, really good. After the LMP2, I jumped in the GTE and I headed to Sebring and I got in, I think, objectively the best sounding race car in all of World Motorsport, which is the Porsche 911 RSR, and I jumped in an Iron Dames livery, of course. And unlike iRacing, you leave Sebring from the garages. You don't just spawn in your pit box, you have to drive out of your garage and around to pit lane, which adds another layer of immersion. The GTE car feels really nice over some curbs, and the braking also feels great like in the other cars. I can tell as soon as I lock the brakes up. I don't know if it's like my fob is a bit different, but the lockup lights just feel really easy to pick out in Le Mans Ultimate compared to iRacing. Otherwise, it's the same feeling that I got in the other cars. I'm struggling to tell what's a good slide and what's a bad slide, as the slip angle is kind of a lot more than in iRacing. It's definitely rFactor 2 in style. The car seems to like slide a tiny bit through the corners. It's just really hard to tell what's a good slide and what's a bad slide. But I guess that's the difference between a good driver and a bad driver. So maybe I just need to get good. Anyway, those are my first thoughts. I literally just wrote a bunch of notes down about these cars because I've had limited amount of time with them. But I think there's a lot of promise with this sim. I'm really glad that they've kind of grabbed rFactor 2 and repackaged it into kind of a game that's a bit more accessible. This feels like the ACC of rFactor, just like ACC was for Assetto Corsa, and I think that's a good thing. Do you like the feeling of Le Mans Ultimate? Feel free to let us know in the comments. Are you not gonna buy the game? Feel free to let us know as well. Otherwise, if you liked the video, you can leave a like button and you can subscribe to Overtake for more sim racing videos. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.